Stop, just for a moment. Have you ever so profoundly underestimated someone that your entire world collapsed? Prepare yourself for the unbelievable story of Preston Hawthorne, a man who believed he had it all: power, wealth, and an ornamental wife. What he fatally ignored was that the woman sitting across from him every morning, the one he so casually dismissed, was about to unleash a corporate tempest that would tear his life down to the foundation. This isn't just a tale of revenge. It is a symphony of poetic justice that will leave you breathless. Preston Hawthorne adjusted his $1,000 Hermes tie, a predator assessing his domain. The polished mahogany of the boardroom table reflected his self-assured smile. Beside him, his ambitious and beautiful protégé, Carla Vance, gave his hand a subtle squeeze under the table. This meeting was his launch pad. He was minutes away from presenting his $5-a-year growth strategy to the mysterious new CEO of their parent company, Alpha Strategies. A senior vice president promotion was practically in his pocket. He only had to impress a corporate titan he had never met. He leaned toward his rival, Richard Sterling, whispering with a petulant chuckle, "I wish my wife could see this. She thinks my biggest decision of the day is what to order for the lunch catering." Little did he know, the most critical decision of his day had already been made by the very woman he so lightly disparaged. The boardroom doors were about to open, and his entire world was about to burn to the ground. The pale, indifferent morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the luxury penthouse on Manhattan's Upper East Side that Preston Hawthorne called home. It was a space designed for a magazine cover: sharp lines, muted colors, and cold, almost impersonal art. A testament to success, a monument to ambition, and as sterile as an operating room. Preston stood before a full-length mirror, knotting a spilled wine-colored silk tie. Every movement was precise, practiced, a reflection of a man who believed he had total control over his universe. "Eliza, have you seen my silver cufflinks? The ones from the Geneva trip?" he called out, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. He didn't turn around. He simply admired the cut of his Italian suit in the reflection. From the kitchen, a gleaming stainless steel and marble space that rarely saw actual cooking, appeared Eliza Hayes. She wore simple gray yoga pants and a faded cotton t-shirt, her dark hair pulled back in a loose ponytail, her face bare of makeup. To a stranger, she was the picture of a comfortable, modest homemaker. To Preston, she was part of the decor. He'd stopped noticing her long ago. "They're in your travel kit on the dresser, where they always are," she said, in an even, quiet voice. She held a cup of black coffee, the steam curling around her fingers. Preston grunted, finding them exactly where she had said. "Right. Big day today, the final presentation to Alpha's new CEO. This is it, Eli. The jump to the C-suite. Everything I've been working for." "I'm sure you'll be wonderful, Preston," she replied, taking a slow sip of her coffee. There was no excitement in her voice, just a tranquil, observant tone he found perpetually irritating. It was as if she were watching a play, not living in the same reality as he was. "You could try to sound a little more thrilled," he chided, finally turning to face her. He scanned her appearance with a slight, almost imperceptible frown. "You know this apartment, your charity luncheons, the life you have. It's all thanks to these big days." Eliza's deep, intelligent blue eyes met his. There was a flicker of something in them, neither anger nor sadness, but something far more complex, a look he hadn't been able to decipher in years. "I am aware of what you provide, Preston. I have never forgotten." The subtext was lost on him. Or perhaps he chose to ignore it. He only saw the modest woman before him, the one who had abandoned her own promising career in software engineering when he got his first big promotion. It was his narrative he had polished and perfected. He had risen, and she had consented. He had generously allowed her to retire to a life of leisure while he battled the titans of industry. "I have to bring Carla with me," he stated, the pronouncement sounding more like a declaration than a request for an opinion. She was instrumental in compiling data for the presentation. It's good exposure for a junior analyst. Eliza's expression didn't change. She just nodded slowly. Carla Vance, the blonde from the marketing department, the one you mentored at the company retreat in Aspen. Preston felt a brief, unpleasant jolt. He hadn't realized Eliza paid that much attention. "Yes, that's the one. She's brilliant, eager to learn." He conveniently omitted that Carla was 26, adored the ground he walked on, and had spent the previous night in a hotel suite with him celebrating his pre-victory. "Well, I hope her exposure is educational," Eliza said, turning away to place her mug in the sink. The words were simple, yet they hung in the air with a strange weight. Preston dismissed it as another of her passive-aggressive moods. He grabbed his leather briefcase, the scent of expensive cologne trailing behind him. He paused at the door, looking back at his wife. She stood with her back to him, gazing out at the sweeping Manhattan skyline. For one fleeting moment, she looked like a stranger in her own home. "Don't wait up for me," he said, the words a familiar refrain. "It'll be a long day of meetings, followed by a celebratory dinner." "Oh, I won't," Eliza countered, her voice soft but clear. "I have a very busy day planned myself." "I'm sure you do." He let out a short, condescending laugh. "Shopping at Bergdorf's or planning another fundraiser. Don't strain yourself," he said, as he closed the door behind him, the solid click sealing him out of her world, and her inside the golden cage he had so carefully constructed. He walked to the elevator, a triumphant smile on his face, imagining Carla waiting for him in the lobby, her eyes bright with admiration and something more. He felt powerful, untouchable, the king of his castle. Meanwhile, Eliza remained at the window, watching her husband's black sedan pull away $40 stories below. She took a deep breath, the first truly relaxed one she had taken all morning. She took out her hair tie, letting her dark hair fall down her shoulders. She walked over to the sleek, minimalist coffee table and picked up a tablet. With a few taps, she opened a file. It was the complete acquisition portfolio for Nexus Corporation, the company Preston worked for, by Alpha Strategies. She scrolled until she found his name, Preston Hawthorne, VP of Marketing. A small, cold smile touched her lips. "Enjoy your celebration, Preston," she whispered to the opulent, empty room. "It's the last one you'll have for a long time." She then turned to her calendar. Her first appointment at 10:00 a.m. was marked in bold. Board of Directors meeting. Presentation to Nexus Corporation executive staff. The leather seats of Preston's Mercedes were the color of rich cream, a stark contrast to the vibrant red of Carla Vance's dress. The dress was a strategic choice, bold enough to be memorable, yet classy enough to scream ambition rather than desperation. "Nervous?" Carla asked, her voice a low murmur. She ran a perfectly manicured finger across the dashboard. Preston chuckled, a deep, confident sound that filled the car. "Nervous, Carla. Nervous is for the unprepared. We've been over this presentation $100 times. The numbers are solid. My strategy is revolutionary. This new CEO, whoever they are, will have no choice but to be impressed." He emphasized whoever they are, a casual assumption based on the aggressive acquisition tactics Alpha Strategies was known for. "And me?" she asked, turning in her seat to look at him. "Will they be impressed with me?" "They'll see a sharp, dedicated analyst who supports her VP," he said, reaching out to place a possessive hand on her knee. "Just stick to the script. Let me do the talking unless a question is directed at you. Answer concisely. Look smart. That's all you have to do. This is my show." Carla's smile tightened, almost imperceptibly. She yearned for the spotlight, but she understood the hierarchy. For now, she was his accessory, the brilliant yet subordinate mind that helped the great Preston Hawthorne achieve his destiny. Her time would come. She believed his promises that once promoted, he would create a new director role just for her, and that he would finally leave his dull, unpassionate wife. "Eliza didn't seem to mind you bringing me," she said, testing the waters as she often did. "She never suspects." Preston scoffed, his eyes on the traffic. "Eli stopped paying attention a decade ago. She lives in her little world of charity galas and book clubs. I doubt she even remembers your name. To her, you're just an intern I'm magnanimously giving a career boost to. It's the perfect cover." The phrase, "the perfect cover," wounded Carla more than she let on. She wasn't a cover. She was the future. She was the one who understood his ambition, the one who matched his drive. Eliza was a relic, a ghost of a past life he hadn't managed to fully shed. "She just seemed so placid," Carla mused. "When I saw her at the company Christmas party, she barely spoke, just stood there smiling. It was a little sad." "It's not sad, it's comfortable," Preston corrected. "She has everything a woman could want, without having to lift a finger. I gave her that. She should be grateful." He genuinely believed it. His guilt over the affair was a tiny, shriveled thing, easily overshadowed by his sense of magnanimity. In his mind, he was providing for 2 women. He was a modern patriarch. They soon left the congested city streets, turning onto the private access road that led to the Alpha Strategies corporate tower. The building was a spear of smoked glass and obsidian steel piercing the Manhattan sky, a statement of pure, unapologetic power, dwarfing Nexus Corporation's more modest headquarters. When Preston pulled into the reserved underground parking spot, a valet rushed to open their doors. Carla felt a genuine chill of awe. This was the major league. This was where fortunes were made and empires were forged. "All right," Preston said, turning to her before stepping out. He examined her head to toe, his eyes lingering on the tightness of her dress. "You look perfect. Remember the plan. We're a team, but I'm the captain. Follow my lead, and tonight, we celebrate your future boss's promotion to senior VP." He sealed the promise with a quick, hard kiss that tasted of coffee and ambition. They ascended in the silent, high-speed elevator to the 60th floor, the penthouse level. The doors opened not to a reception area, but directly into a vast, minimalist atrium with a panoramic view of the city. The air was cool and smelled faintly of ozone and money. A severe-looking woman with a sharp haircut and a tablet met them. "Mr. Hawthorne, Ms. Vance, welcome to Alpha. The board is convened. Please follow me." She led them down a hallway lined with abstract art that likely cost more than Preston's car. Everyone they passed was impeccably dressed, moving with a silent urgency. The atmosphere was electric, a stark contrast to Nexus Corporation's often complacent culture. Preston felt his own confidence surge. He belonged here. This was his natural habitat. He gave Carla a reassuring wink. He was her guide into this rarefied world, her benefactor. The assistant stopped before a pair of imposing frosted glass doors. "They are ready for you. Mr. Sterling is already inside." Richard Sterling was the outgoing CEO of Nexus Corporation, a man in his late $60 happy to take his golden parachute and retire to Florida. He was a formality, a bridge between the old and the new. The real power, the person Preston had to conquer, waited behind those doors. Preston smoothed his suit jacket, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open, stepping into the most bright, intimidating boardroom he had ever seen. The Alpha Strategies boardroom was less a room and more a theater for corporate warfare. One entire wall was a seamless glass panel offering a god's eye view of the city. The table was a single, colossal slab of polished black granite, so dark it seemed to absorb the light. Seated around it were a dozen individuals who radiated an aura of quiet, lethal competence. These were the Alpha executives. At the head of the table sat Richard Sterling, looking more like a guest than a host. Preston scanned the faces. There was the stern-faced CFO in his $50, the head of legal affairs, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes, Sylvia Torres, and several other VPs he recognized from industry publications. They were the sharks, and he was here to prove he was one of them. "Preston, good of you to join us," Richard Sterling said, his voice a little too loud in the silent room. "Everyone, this is Preston Hawthorne, our VP of Marketing at Nexus Corporation, and his analyst, Carla Vance." The two exchanged cool, assessing acknowledgments. Preston felt a dozen pairs of eyes evaluating him, and he met them with his most charming, confident smile. He and Carla took the two vacant seats opposite the main board members. He placed his sleek laptop and leather portfolio on the table, his movements economical and self-assured. Richard Sterling, his internal rival, VP of Operations, sat a few chairs down. Richard offered a tense, professional nod. Preston caught the flash of jealousy in Richard's eyes and savored it. Richard had come alone. Preston, on the other hand, had brought his star protege, a visual testament to his leadership and eye for talent. "We are just waiting for our new CEO to join us," Sylvia Torres, the legal counsel, stated. Her voice was crisp and brooked no argument. "She is finishing up a call with our Tokyo office." She. The word registered in Preston's mind with a flash of surprise. He had automatically assumed the new boss would be a man. A woman in this aggressive tech acquisition space was rare. He mentally recalibrated. This was even better. In his experience, he was excellent at charming, powerful women, at playing the role of the indispensable, brilliant male subordinate. To fill the silence, Richard Sterling began a strained compliment. "Preston has been with Nexus for $12 years, a real pillar of the company. His marketing strategies were key to our growth in the early 2010s." It was a faint compliment, referencing past glories. Preston felt a spike of irritation. He was about to unveil the future, not revisit the past. He directed a charming smile toward Sylvia Torres. "Richard is too kind. The past is prologue. I'm far more excited to discuss the next 5 years. We are poised to penetrate the South American market in a way no one has anticipated." Before anyone could respond, he leaned slightly toward Richard Sterling, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "It's a different level up here, right? Makes you feel sorry for the ones left behind. I spoke to my wife this morning. She was agonizing over which tablecloth to use for a luncheon. Bless her heart." He shook his head with a look of fond exasperation. "Different worlds." Richard offered an evasive grunt, but Preston knew the seed was planted. He was painting a picture of himself, a high flyer unencumbered by domestic triviality. Being married to a simple woman who managed the home while he conquered the world was part of his personal brand. Carla, sitting next to him, suddenly felt relieved, sensing the implied contrast. She was part of the real world, his world. The tension in the room suddenly shifted. A palpable wave of deference and respect swept across the alpha executives as they subtly straightened in their chairs, their eyes pivoting toward the frosted glass doors. The quiet chatter ceased. "Looks like it's showtime," Richard Sterling murmured with a hint of relief in his tone. Preston felt a jolt of adrenaline. His moment had arrived. He smoothed his tie one last time, squared his shoulders, and focused on the entrance. He prepared his power smile, the one that conveyed both respect and ambition. This woman, whoever she was about to meet the man who would be the most valuable asset in her newly acquired company. He would make himself undeniable. The heavy glass doors slid open with a faint hydraulic whoosh. A pair of expensive-looking, yet understated black heels clicked determinedly on the marble floor. They were followed by the sharp crease of a navy blue pantsuit, tailored with a precision that denoted immense wealth and a refusal to compromise. The woman who walked in was tall and moved with an unshakable composure that instantly dominated the room. Her dark hair, which Preston had last seen in a messy ponytail, was swept up into a sleek, neat chignon at the nape of her neck. Her face, bare of makeup that morning, was now skillfully and minimally enhanced to highlight her strong cheekbones and piercing blue eyes. She was not smiling. Her expression was one of cold, distant authority. She walked to the head of the table, her gaze sweeping over the assembled executives, acknowledging each with a slight, almost imperceptible nod. And then her eyes landed on him. For one horrible, paralyzing second, Preston Hawthorne's world stopped turning. The blood drained from his face, replaced by an icy dread that started in his stomach and spread through his veins. His confident smile dissolved. His mouth opened slightly. The room, the table, the people, everything blurred into a meaningless background. There was only her, the modest homemaker, the woman he thought was deciding on canapés. His wife stopped at the head of the table, placing a slim tablet in front of her. Her voice, when she spoke, was not the soft, familiar tone he heard over breakfast. It was a voice tuned for command, crisp, clear, and with a steel edge. "Good morning, everyone. I apologize for the delay. Thank you all for being here. For those from Nexus Corporation, whom I haven't had the pleasure of meeting, my name is Eliza Hayes. I am the founder and CEO of Alpha Strategies." She paused, letting her name, her maiden name, and her title sink in. Her cold blue eyes then deliberately moved around the table, past the other executives, past Richard Sterling's stunned face, past Carla's utter confusion, and locked directly onto her husband. A flash of something cold and sharp passed through them before she addressed him directly. Her voice cut through the stunned silence of the room. "Mr. Hawthorne, it is a pleasure to finally meet you in a professional capacity." The words Mr. Hawthorne hit Preston with the force of a physical blow. It was the name of a stranger, a subordinate, a line item on a balance sheet. In that single formal address, $15 years of shared history, of intimacy, and marriage evaporated. He was no longer Preston, her husband. He was Mr. Hawthorne, the employee. His mind scrambled frantically, trying to piece together the collapsing jigsaw puzzle. Eliza Hayes, her maiden name, the name on her old university degrees, the ones he had boxed up in the attic, artifacts of a life he thought she had left behind. Alpha Hayes. The connection was so obvious, so insultingly simple, it had never occurred to him to make it. The woman in the power suit who looked like his wife but felt like an alien queen, the tranquil observer at his breakfast table, was gone. In her place was a formidable executive who held his entire future in the palm of her hand. The condescending joke he'd made to Richard Sterling moments earlier replayed in his head, every word a self-inflicted wound. The humiliation was a physical sensation, a hot flush that climbed up his neck and burned his ears. Beside him, Carla was a statue of confusion. She looked from Eliza to Preston and back again with a furrowed brow. The resemblance was undeniable, but the context was impossible. She watched the blood drain from Preston's face, the rigid terror in his posture. A sickening, growing comprehension began to curdle in her stomach. This powerful, intimidating woman. It couldn't be. Eliza showed no emotion. She was the picture of corporate control. "Let us begin," she said, her gaze sweeping the room again, deliberately avoiding Preston. "As you all know, Alpha Strategies has officially completed the acquisition of Nexus Corporation. For many of you at Alpha, this is business as usual. For our new colleagues at Nexus, I understand it is a time of uncertainty. Let me be clear, my goal is not to dismantle what you have built, but to identify your core strengths, cut your considerable fat, and integrate your viable assets into our global strategy." And the phrase, "cut your considerable fat," hung in the air like a guillotine blade. All the Nexus executives shifted uncomfortably. Cold sweat broke out on Preston's forehead. "I have spent the last 6 weeks conducting a thorough analysis of every department," Eliza continued, tapping her tablet. A huge screen behind her lit up with complex charts and data flows. Finance, operations, R&D, and marketing. I have read every report, analyzed every metric, and reviewed every $5 plan, which brings us to today's agenda. Her hawkish eyes finally settled on Preston again. "Mr. Hawthorne, I believe you have a presentation for us on a proposed South American market expansion." It was an order, not a request. Preston's throat was bone dry. His hands on his laptop trembled slightly. All the confidence, the arrogance he had walked in with, had evaporated. He felt naked, exposed, a fool in a $1,000 suit. He looked at the faces around the table. The Alpha executives watched him with predatory curiosity. Richard Sterling stared grimly at the table, refusing to look at Preston, granting him the small mercy of not witnessing his complete and utter annihilation. And Carla. He risked a glance at her. Her face was pale, her lipstick suddenly garish. The confusion in her eyes had been replaced by the horrible realization of a person who willingly walked into a trap. The boring, placid wife was the CEO. The woman he had dismissed as a sad relic was about to decide his fate. "Mr. Hawthorne," Eliza's voice was sharp, impatient now. Sylvia Torres, the sharp legal counsel, who was clearly Eliza's second in command, leaned in slightly. "Perhaps Mr. Hawthorne is not feeling well? The pressure of presenting to a new board can be significant." The underlying tone was mockery, and Preston knew she was in on it. She knew everything. Gathering every last shred of his professional facade, Preston cleared his throat. "No, I'm fine, of course. My apologies, Madam CEO." The honorific felt acid on his tongue. He opened his laptop, his fingers clumsy on the keys. The presentation he had been so proud of now felt childish, a child's crayon drawing presented to a master artist. He clicked the file open. The slide title, Nexus Corporation, Conquering New Frontiers, authored by Carla Vance, appeared on the main screen. It felt like a sick joke. He was the one who had been conquered. "Please," Eliza said, gesturing to the screen to proceed. "Dazzle us." Her voice was laced with irony, so cold, so sharp, it could have cut diamonds. As Preston opened his mouth to speak, he knew he was no longer fighting merely for a promotion. He was fighting for the last vestiges of his professional life in front of the woman whose life he had so completely and foolishly underestimated. Preston began to speak, his voice a tight, hollow version of his usual confident tone. He tried to fall back on the familiar cadence of his speech, the practiced words and compelling narrative that he and Carla had rehearsed until it flowed naturally. But the words felt alien in his mouth, the concepts fragile and transparent. Every assertion of projected growth and synergistic opportunity sounded like a desperate lie under Eliza's unwavering gaze. She let him speak for exactly 7 minutes. He was just at his climax about the market penetration strategy for Brazil, when her voice cut across his presentation like a surgeon's scalpel. "Mr. Hawthorne, a question." He stopped mid-sentence. "Yes, Madam CEO." Eliza slid a finger across her tablet, and the main screen behind her instantly switched. His meticulously crafted slide was replaced by a dizzying array of spreadsheets and market analysis reports. "Your entire projection for the Brazilian market is predicated on a $15 annual growth in the consumer electronics sector with a primary focus on the affluent urban demographic. Is that correct?" Yes. Our data indicates—" "What data?" she interrupted, her tone clinical. "Because my data, compiled from 3 independent global analysis firms, indicates that the sector growth has stagnated at 4 hours for the last 18 months, with a projected ceiling of 5 for the next 3 years, due to recent tariff implementations. Furthermore, the most significant growth is not in the already saturated affluent urban sector, but in the emerging middle class of secondary cities, a demographic your plan completely ignores." A low murmur ran through the Alpha executives. They were looking at the data on the screen, then back at Preston. Their expressions ranged from disappointment to sheer disdain. "In addition," Eliza continued, relentless, "your proposed distribution and logistics partner, a company named Blue Logistics, is currently under federal investigation for bribery and is on the verge of bankruptcy. Your due diligence did not uncover this." Preston froze. That was a detail Carla should have verified. He shot her a panicked glance. Carla looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her. Her face was ashen. She was shrinking in her chair, trying to become invisible. We were assured of their stability," Preston stammered, the excuse sounding pathetic even to his own ears. "Assured." Eliza's eyebrow arched slightly. "Alpha does not operate on assurances, Mr. Hawthorne. It operates on verifiable facts. Your proposed marketing budget, $50 million or euros for the first year, is not only inflated, but it is aimed at the wrong people in the wrong places, using a potentially criminal partner. Other than that, it's a stellar plan." The sarcasm was devastating. The sarcasm was, some of the Alpha board members couldn't suppress faint, cruel smiles. Eliza wasn't finished. She systematically and emotionlessly dismantled his entire presentation. She questioned his ad spend, pointing out that his media buying plan relied on audience data from 3 years ago. She shredded his staffing plan, pointing out that he had budgeted a massive new office in São Paulo, completely failing to consider a more cost-effective remote workforce, a model Alpha had perfected. With every point she made, she wasn't just destroying his professional credibility, she was annihilating the core myth of their marriage. He was the brilliant businessman, the titan of industry. She was the homemaker. But in this room, it was clear who possessed the superior intellect, the sharper instincts, and the more rigorous work ethic. He had been playing checkers while she was mastering multi-dimensional chess. She finally directed her attention to the projections. "Vance," she said, her voice making Carla jump in her seat. "I see you co-authored this report." Carla swallowed hard, her voice a tiny squeak. "These sales projections," Eliza said, circling a number on the screen with a digital red pen. "A 400% market share increase in $2 years. What model did you use to arrive at this figure?" It was a proprietary algorithm based on synergistic market capture," Carla managed, reciting a meaningless buzzword they had invented to sound impressive. Eliza's expression remained inscrutable. "A proprietary algorithm. I see. Can you show it to me? Or is the formula as fictitious as the growth it predicts?" Carla's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She was completely outmatched. She was a junior analyst who had been so dazzled by her affair with a senior VP that she had neglected her work, assuming his authority would shield her from scrutiny. She had never imagined being vetted by a CEO who actually read the fine print. The illusion shattered. Preston wasn't a god, he was a fraud, and she had tied her career, her reputation, to him. The promises of a directorship and a future together now seemed like a cruel joke. She felt used, not for her body, but for her complicity. She had been the fool, the eager, ambitious woman who had done his homework half-heartedly for him. Eliza turned her cold gaze back to Preston. "Your strategy, Mr. Hawthorne, is not merely flawed. It is lazy. It is a work of profound arrogance, built on antiquated assumptions and an astonishing lack of diligence. It is the type of work I would expect from a company that is failing, which I suppose is why I was able to acquire it at such a favorable price." She dropped the final insult, and the silence in the room was absolute. Richard Sterling blanched, realizing the company he had run for $20 years was being branded as a sinking ship. Eliza closed her tablet, the screen behind her going blank. The execution was over. "That will be all for the group presentation. The Alpha team and I will now break for a strategy session. Mr. Sterling, you are welcome to join us. Mr. Sedano, I would also like you to stay. I have some questions about Nexus's operational efficiencies." She stood up, a clear dismissal. "Mr. Hawthorne, Ms. Vance." The words hung in the air, excused, dismissed like schoolchildren. All the other Nexus executives were being invited to stay, to consult, to be part of the future. But not him, not the great VP of marketing. Stunned, Preston closed his laptop. He couldn't force himself to look at anyone. He could feel the weight of their judgment, their pity, their scorn. He rose on shaking legs. Carla scrambled to gather her things, her hands trembling so badly that she dropped her pen, which rolled under the massive table. She didn't dare retrieve it. She just wanted to escape. As Preston walked toward the door, his professional life in ruins, Eliza's voice stopped him one last time. It was softer now, but no less commanding. "Actually, Mr. Hawthorne, a word in my office. Now." Carla fled the room without looking back. The heavy glass doors slid shut behind her, leaving Preston alone with his wife, his new boss, and the shattered fragments of his once perfect life. Eliza's private office was adjacent to the boardroom. It was even more stunning. A corner suite with 2 walls of glass that made you feel as if you were floating above the city. The decor was minimal and tasteful. A large oak desk, a few carefully chosen pieces of modern art, and bookshelves lined not with awards, but with books on economics, philosophy, and engineering. It was the office of a thinker, a builder. Preston walked in like a condemned man, his footsteps silent on the plush gray carpet. Eliza walked past him to stand in front of the window, her back to him, looking out at the city. The power dynamic was absolute. She didn't offer him a seat. The silence stretched for one long, agonizing minute. Preston's mind raced, searching for a strategy, an angle, a way to salvage this nightmare. Should he apologize? Beg? Feign ignorance? Rage? Every option felt futile. 15 years ago, Preston, Eliza finally said, her voice calm and reflective. It was no longer the glacial CEO, but something far more dangerous, the woman he had wronged. 15 years ago, I had just received a patent for a data compression algorithm that was going to revolutionize the industry. I had venture capitalists lining up. I was $28. She turned from the window to face him. Her expression was not rage, but weariness, as if examining a disappointing specimen. And then you got that promotion to senior director. You said we had to move to Manhattan. You said you needed my support. You said one career in the family was enough, and that yours was already on a clear trajectory. You asked me to choose, and I was in love. I was naive. I believed in the partnership. So, I chose you. I put my patent in a drawer. I put my dreams on hold, and became Mrs. Eliza Hawthorne, the perfect corporate wife. I organized the dinners, charmed your bosses, created the serene, effortless home life that allowed you to focus solely on your ambition. Every word was a perfectly placed stone, building a wall between them. For a while, I even believed the story you told everyone, she continued, stepping closer, that I had simply retired, that I was happy with my charity work and my book clubs. But then I started to see it. The condescension, the small jokes at my expense, the way you would explain simple financial concepts to me as if I were a child. You didn't just want a supportive wife, Preston. You wanted a smaller one. You needed me to be small so you could feel big. He winced. The truth of her words was undeniable. He had done all those things. I started to get bored. Her voice turned colder. And then, about 5 years ago, I got angry. So, I pulled out that old patent, used the inheritance my parents left me, the money you always called my little hobby fund, and I set up a small consultancy out of the studio you never used. I hired 2 brilliant young programmers. I worked while you were on your business trips and late-night client dinners. The pieces clicked together with nauseating clarity. The nights she spent on her laptop that he dismissed as online shopping, her frequent lunches with friends in the financial district. It had all been happening right under his nose. Hayes Consulting became Alpha Strategies, she stated simply. We don't just invest. We build. We create. We innovate. While you were busy rearranging the deck chairs on a stagnant company, I was building a fleet of battleships. And when the opportunity arose to acquire Nexus Corporation, well, the irony was too delicious to pass up. Finally, Preston's dam of shock broke, replaced by desperate, sputtering rage. So, this whole thing is an elaborate revenge plot. You bought my company just to humiliate me because I had an affair? Eliza laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. An affair, Preston? You are so breathtakingly arrogant. Do you think this is about Carla Vance? She is a symptom, not the disease. I've known about your affairs for years. Tiffany, the paralegal 2 years ago, the one from HR before that. You are as predictable as you are pathetic. Your infidelity was just confirmation of what I already knew. Our marriage was a hollow shell, a business arrangement where I was the silent partner. She walked to her desk and picked up a thick manila envelope, holding it out to him. This is not about revenge, Preston. This is about a course correction. My course correction. He didn't take the envelope. Those are divorce papers. she said. "My lawyers will be in touch with yours. The apartment is in my name. My inheritance assets are protected. You will receive exactly what you are entitled to under the prenuptial agreement we signed, which, if you recall, you insisted on. As for your professional life," her CEO persona clicked back into place. "Your performance today was abysmal. Your department is bloated and ineffective. Your leadership is based on ego, not results. You are a liability, not an asset to my company. However, firing you on day one would be messy. So, here is what will happen. Your department will be restructured, effective immediately. Your role as VP of Marketing is redundant. We are creating a new, temporary position for you. Special Projects Consultant, reporting directly to Richard Sterling." The final humiliation was perfect. He would report to his rival. "You will be tasked with overseeing the orderly transition of assets and accounts until your position is eliminated in 3 to 6 months. Your bonus is rescinded. Your stock options are now under the control of the new parent company. You will clear out your office before the end of the week. Is that clear, Mr. Hawthorne?" Preston stood there, utterly defeated. He had lost his wife, his mistress, his job, his reputation, and his dignity in the span of a single morning. The man who had entered the building as a king was leaving as less than a commoner. He was a ghost, a footnote in the story of Eliza Hayes's meteoric rise. "Eli, please," he whispered the name, a desperate plea for a connection that no longer existed. Eliza looked at him one last time, her blue eyes showing not an ounce of pity, only a deep, definitive sense of closure. "My name," she said, her voice as hard and beautiful as a diamond, "is Ms. Hayes." 6 months later, the Manhattan autumn gave way to the first hints of winter. The view from the 60th floor office of Alpha Strategies was crystal clear. Eliza Hayes stood at the window, not as a prisoner in a golden cage, but as a sovereign inspecting her realm. The company thrived under her leadership. She had cut the fat from Nexus Corporation, as promised, and reinvested in its R&D core, breathing new life into a company that had been slowly suffocating under complacent, self-serving management. Preston Hawthorne's temporary tenure as Special Projects Consultant had quietly ended. It was, by all accounts, a profoundly humiliating experience for him. Stripped of his title, his corner office, and his authority, he had been forced to witness the company he thought he knew transformed by the wife he thought he owned. He had done the work assigned to him with a grim, joyless efficiency, a ghost haunting the halls of his former kingdom. 1 year after the acquisition, Eliza's phone vibrated with a message from Sylvia Torres. It was a link to an industry blog with a brief note. "Thought you'd find this amusing." Eliza tapped the link. The article was a dry piece about the quarterly earnings of a mid-tier logistics firm based in Florida. Her eyes scanned the text until she found the name mentioned in a short paragraph about the company's new regional sales team. Marcus Hawthorne, the name he used after the divorce. He had been hired as a senior account manager. It was a respectable job, but an astonishing fall from grace for a man who had once been a VP on the verge of the C-suite. He was no longer in the glossy pages of business magazines, but buried in the fine print of a minor trade publication. Eliza felt a brief, clinical flash of something. Not pity, but a distant acknowledgement of a deserved fate. It was an echo of a life that no longer felt like hers, a ghost story whose power to frighten had long since faded. She closed the article and directed her attention to the documents on her desk. They were the first annual reports for her STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Mentorship program. Applications had tripled. 3 of her first mentees had just received full scholarships to MIT. This was her true legacy. It wasn't in the destruction of one man's ego, but in the construction of futures for countless brilliant young women. She was building an empire not just of profit, but of potential. The snow continued to fall, burying the old world and promising a new one. Eliza Hayes picked up her pen, a faint smile on her lips, and turned back to work. The echo of Preston Hawthorne's name, already forgotten. 3 years later, Eliza Hayes was no longer simply a CEO, but a global authority. Alpha Strategies was successfully acquiring competitors, not through hostile takeovers, but because companies sought to integrate into her highly efficient, data-driven framework. The firm's reputation for ethical, yet ruthless optimization made it the industry leader. Eliza was in her New York office, preparing for a major merger announcement, when her assistant buzzed her. "Ms. Hayes, there's a very unusual email. It's from a regional consulting firm in Boston. They've submitted a proposal for a major market data synergy project. You told me to personally vet all significant new pitches, and this one stands out." "How so?" Eliza asked, scrolling through an unrelated financial document. "The core analytical framework is structurally sound, highly original, and mathematically elegant," the assistant reported. "Frankly, it's the best synthesis of emerging data we've seen this year. But the lead consultant's name is Carla Vance." Eliza paused, her finger resting on the screen. Carla Vance, the ambitious, dazzling junior analyst who had been Preston's accomplice and who had fled Nexus the morning of the collapse. Eliza had not destroyed Carla's career, allowing her to find work in a smaller market, a deliberate act of choosing correction over annihilation. "Display her firm's profile," Eliza commanded. The profile popped up. Carla's firm was small, independent, and clearly successful. The arrogance had been replaced by a quiet professionalism in her corporate photo. "She's done good work," Eliza observed softly. "The analysis is stellar. It is precisely the diligence Preston lacked." The team flagged her history with Mr. Hawthorne and the Nexus debacle, the assistant pointed out carefully. "They want to know if we should red flag the proposal due to ethical concerns." Eliza leaned back in her chair, a slight smile touching her lips. This was the true test of her philosophy. Her anger toward Preston was extinguished. He had paid the price of irrelevance, but Carla was still a liability, a living connection to old wounds. "No," Eliza decided. "Send the proposal to Richard Sterling. Tell him to vet the numbers and the legal framework, but to disregard historical ethical concerns. I want a full breakdown of the project's viability." 2 hours later, Richard Sterling, the new COO, walked into her office holding the proposal. "The numbers are impeccable, Eliza. It's brilliant work. It's a work of deep competence. It'll save us $15 in $40. And the lead consultant, Richard, who had witnessed Preston's humiliation firsthand, hesitated. "The name is awkward, but if you ask me if she's capable of performing at an alpha level, yes, she is." "Then we will proceed," Eliza confirmed. "But there will be one condition. We will absorb the proposal and her firm's team, integrating them under a $2 contract. Carla Vance will report directly to you, Richard. You will mentor her. Her past association with the failures of Nexus must be permanently annulled by her demonstrable competence at Alpha." Richard nodded, understanding the subtle brilliance of the order. Eliza wasn't rewarding Carla, nor was she punishing her. She was validating the work while imposing a rigorous structure, a way to ensure Carla's ambition was channeled purely into results, with no room for personal politics. Eliza Hayes had moved past petty revenge to the point where she could now extract value from the very people who had once helped tear down her life. She saw Carla not as a rival or a threat, but as a repurposed asset, a talented mind who had paid her dues and was now worthy of investment. Her ultimate victory was not just building alpha strategies, it was using that empire to build a future where competence, not comfort or cruelty, was the ultimate currency. Years turned into a decade. Eliza Hayes was no longer just the CEO of Alpha. She was a renowned leader whose ideas on data-driven ethics were reshaping global business practices. She sat in her office high above London, gazing at the intricate web of lights below, the arteries and veins of the city. She had built her empire using a singular, brutal truth. Unleveraged potential is the highest form of negligence. She thought of Preston, somewhere in Florida, a low-level manager whose life was now a footnote. She thought of Carla, now a respected leader within Alpha, who had paid the price of ambition but had earned competence. She had turned the venom of his arrogance into fuel and the wreckage of their marriage into the foundation of a global power. Her greatest achievement was not the billions in assets, but the system she had created. A system that could recognize and cultivate value in the most unlikely places, in a discarded patent, in an inheritance dismissed as a hobby fund, and even in a talented but misguided former rival. The final irony, she realized, was that Preston's insult, "You're comfortable, Eliza," had been correct. He had mistaken her comfort for complacency. He had mistaken her patience for pettiness. But true comfort, she had learned, was the absence of reliance on another person's fragile ego. It was the serene certainty that no external force could ever define or diminish her. Eliza raised her hand, looking at the familiar lines on her palm. The scars of the past were invisible. She had been liberated by one man's arrogance and crowned by her own intellectual rigor. She was not just the CEO of Alpha Strategies, she was the architect of the Age of Equitas, a time where value, once underestimated, was destined to prevail. And in the silence of her skyscraper office, Eliza smiled. The story was over. Her legacy had begun.